What's up, guys? My name's Brandon, and welcome back to Apple Weekly. In this episode, we're going to be discussing even more new iOS 26 and 26.1 beta features and changes. We're also going to talk about Apple's new internal ChatGPT-like application, why Apple might have a Meta Ray-Bans competitor sooner than we expected, some crazy Apple product leaks, and more. Okay, so let's start by talking about iOS 26.0.1, which is one of the biggest double point updates we've seen in quite some time. So that was released earlier this week. You might have seen my video on that. I was not in my normal studio like I am right now. So I'll talk more about that at the end of this video, like where Apple Weekly's been and everything like that. But anyways, yes, we did get iOS 26.0.1 earlier this week. This was long expected. It came out a lot later than we anticipated, but it was a much bigger update than we actually thought it would be. So you can see there are some pretty significant changes here. I'm just going to run through these quickly because I did make a full video on this, but we have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth may occasionally disconnect on the iPhone 17 models and the iPhone Air. This fixes an issue where some users were unable to connect to a cellular network after updating to iOS 26. There's also a really weird bug related to the iPhone 17s in terms of when you take pictures, there could be random artifacts on the photo, and that was all software based. So it wasn't a hardware bug. Some people on Reddit thought this could have been a hardware bug, but Apple did address this in 26.0.1, and it says that photos taken under certain lighting conditions with iPhone 17 or iPhone Air may include unexpected artifacts, so that has been resolved. And then of course the classic app icons may appear blank after updating. We've had that for a while now. Pretty much every 26.0 beta had that. It's finally been addressed. And then also voiceover is fixed as well because it could become disabled after updating to 26. So clearly a really big double point update. Those are typically always important for bug fixes, but a lot of these were pretty major bug fixes. We did also get a security patch as well, but that was it. And that was a public release. Also, if you are on iOS 26.1 beta right now, you are not going to have those fixes in 26.1 beta. It's probably going to come in the next beta for 26.1. And speaking of iOS 26.1, that's what I'm currently running right here. And it's actually a pretty small update so far, at least in the first beta. There's really not a lot going on. I did make a full video on this, but there's really not much new since that video to talk about with iOS 26.1. But, hopefully with beta 2 and future betas, we will get some more features. And probably my favorite feature in iOS 26.1 beta so far, I've actually used this like every single day because I am running this on my main device, are the swipe gestures on Apple Music. I know it seems small, but the fact we can swipe to go forward and back is so satisfying on the now playing view, and also in the mini player down here. I love actually doing it in the mini player, swiping from right to left right there to go to the next or previous song. And also, I don't know if it's just me, but auto mix seems to be a good bit better as well than it was in iOS 26. So I've noticed that auto mix, it's just more of like an actual remix now in 26.1 beta 1. So I'm not sure if that's placebo, maybe just the random songs I'm getting shuffled into each other, but I have noticed that auto mix seems to have been improved with 26.1. But I have to admit, I'm not the biggest fan of this new playback bar in the Photos application. Yes, it's more legible. Yes, it's kind of easier to use, but it really doesn't match the liquid glass aesthetic. So I don't know, it's more frosted. It just doesn't look as good to me as what we had in previous versions, although it is a bit more functional. So maybe that's good. And I really like how the numbers pop up from there as well and then kind of go back in. So it looks a little bit cleaner. Maybe it needs some tweaks to look more like liquid glass. And I've also had some people ask me about 26.1 in terms of performance and battery life, if it's actually that much better than iOS 26. And surprisingly, I've had a lot of people tell me it is better. Now, again, you got to keep in mind, a lot of this is placebo. A lot of people are just imagining that things are better because they updated it to a new version, especially after being on 26 for so long. So there is going to be a lot of placebo. However, I'm not discounting those people because they may actually be seeing improvement. So you guys let me know if you're seeing an improvement in performance or battery life with 26.1 beta 1. For me, I'm not really seeing much of a difference from 26.0. If anything, it's actually even a little bit worse for me in terms of at least battery life. So maybe it's just because it's a beta, you can't really expect to have better performance and better battery life on a first beta, but anything's possible at this point. So you guys let me know in a comment down below. But for me, battery life has been almost identical to 26.0. So hopefully that does improve, and I'm sure that will improve with future betas. And for those of you keeping score at home, we did run a Geekbench test as well when we did initially install this. So you can see kind of what we scored right there on 26.1 and compare that to your device and of course to previous devices. So it doesn't always tell the full story, but I do like to keep that as a log to compare to future versions. Okay, so now let's talk about this new ChatGPT internal application thing that Apple is working on. So this came from Bloomberg, and basically they're saying that Apple has designed a ChatGPT-like application to help its engineers test the overhauled version of Siri. But unfortunately, the Siri app isn't going to be released to the public. It's strictly for internal testing. But what's confusing is we've heard for a while that Apple is actually going to release release a ChatGPT-like application, but now we're hearing that this one is internal. So I'm not sure, it's not really clear if it's the same application or not, but it's kind of disappointing to know that this is just going to stay internal. We're not, most likely, not going to actually see a public release of this. So I don't know, maybe we're not going to see a actual application for Apple's like ChatGPT version, LLM Siri or whatever. It's just going to be built into the software, not a standalone application. Maybe that's why this is just an application for, engineers. But I just thought that was pretty interesting, and I did want to mention it because a lot of people are getting it confused, thinking it's actually coming out like tomorrow. It's not. It's an internal application only. Now, before we move on from software, I do want to talk about what to expect next from Apple in terms of software. So, we should be seeing iOS 26.1 beta 2 next. So we could see that later this week, or most likely we will see that on October 6th. The week of October 6th is when we should see iOS 26.1 beta 2 for registered developers and for public beta testers a little bit later. Now, we're not going to see 26.1, the official final release, until most likely the end of October, potentially even early November. So just keep that in mind. It could be correlated to a product launch as well, which we'll get to that in a minute because there are some products absolutely launching imminently, like within the next month or so. So anyways, yeah, so 26.1, we should be seeing that at the end of the month. Now, I've had a lot of people ask me, are we going to see a 26.0.2 now that we saw a 26.0.1? And the reality is we don't know. It depends on what Apple finds and what they decide to push out a fix for. If it's something major, if it's widespread enough, then we should see a release of 26.0.2. But as of right now, we don't have any proof of that existing. However, we pretty much have the next 3 weeks to see a 26.0.2 if necessary. So just know that is also a possibility if you are not on the betas currently. Okay, so now let's talk about some more Apple news. And we're going to start with Scratchgate. You guys have probably heard this by now. Scratchgate is basically where the iPhone 17 models, specifically the iPhone Air and the 17 Pro models, are really just getting scratched up a lot in the Apple stores. And at first, a lot of people thought it was not just related to the Apple stores. It was just like if you slid this on a table, if you hit it with a penny, it would scratch, it would turn silver, you would be able to go right through the coating. But that's not really the case. That's very exaggerated. And a lot of these issues are actually happening in the Apple store, apparently because of the MagSafe charger that Apple used to hold up these iPhones. And Apple actually acknowledged this, which is pretty rare. So they actually talked to 9to5Mac about this, and they said this: Apple tells me it has determined these imperfections are caused by worn MagSafe stands used in some stores. It also clarifies that the marks aren't scratches, but rather material transfer from the stand to the phone that is removable with cleaning. The company says it's working to address these problems at the store, presumably by replacing the worn MagSafe stands. Other iPhones on display are also affected by this, including iPhone 16 models. So that's pretty interesting, and that's kind of what I've seen as well when I've gone into multiple Apple stores lately. There are like little marks on the back, but I just take my shirt and I rub them off and it just comes right off. So I think maybe a lot of people are just assuming these like deep scratches, like really bad scratches, when in reality they're not. So a lot of kind of TikTok clickbaiting going on here, making it seem like it's a much bigger issue than it is. Clearly, it is an issue for some people if they drop it, and things like that. Clearly you're going to see some peeling of this material because it is aluminum now. You will see it turn silver if you drop it. But as far as the actual scratches go, in the Apple stores I've seen it in, I've literally just had my shirts and I can rub those marks off. They kind of look like scratches, but they're not deep scratches. They're kind of just marks there. I don't know how to describe it. Maybe it's just material transfer like they said in the statement. I'm not too sure what it was. I just know I was able to wipe it off of 2 different phones. But I'm really curious about you guys. Are you experiencing any type of Scratchgate issues with your iPhone 17 or your iPhone Air? Because I've been using these. I've been using the iPhone Air without a case and also the 17 Pro Max without a case. So I'm really curious to know, if I'm not getting scratches, I'd be curious to know what you're doing with your phone to get scratches on it. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying that for average day-to-day use, I haven't dropped either one of these, by the way. So, I haven't had an experience with that. But in terms of just scratches from being in your pocket and things like that, I've not had any issues. I am pretty careful with mine, so maybe that's why, but you let me know in a comment down below if you're having any Scratchgate issues. Now let's talk about these leaked Apple products because this is kind of crazy. So if you guys remember last year, we saw the M4 MacBook Pro, the 14-inch MacBook Pro, get unboxed. Like there was a Russian YouTuber who unboxed this before the product was even announced by Apple. And a lot of people said this was fake, but it turned out to be true. Now, fast forward to this year, this fall, we're seeing that same Russian YouTuber unbox the M5 iPad Pro before Apple even announced it. Not just before they released it, before they even announced the M5 iPad Pro. He has it and he's unboxed it. But unfortunately, this seems like a very small upgrade over the M4 iPad Pro. So it looks like a 13-inch iPad Pro with the M5 chip. and 256 gigs of storage, and it comes in space black. But we're not really seeing any type of other improvements or really any changes. So it seems like it's just a spec bump updates, which I guess is not too surprising since the M4 was so awesome, but we are going to see a minor spec bump for the iPad Pro if you're in the market for that. But it gets even crazier because we have even more Apple products that got leaked inadvertently, or maybe not inadvertently, but just before they were even announced by Apple. And it's pretty much confirmed in both of these cases. So we're also seeing this from the FCC. Yes, the FCC leaked the upcoming MacBook Pro. So the FCC published documents that reference model numbers that do not correspond to existing devices, existing MacBooks. So there's one that's A3434 that references an unreleased MacBook Pro, and then other numbers are basically for the M5 iPad Pro and other new products. So of course the FCC is not going to say exactly what the product is. They're just going to use these model numbers, but of course through the dissecting of like Mac Rumors and people like that, they're able to dissect it and pretty much assume that this is the new MacBook Pro that's already listed in the filing. But that's not the only one, because the FCC also leaked the next Vision Pro headset. Yes, we're actually seeing the Vision Pro get leaked in terms of the model number. So it references an Apple-designed head-mounted device with a model number of A3416, and it also includes an image of the device, which clearly shows this is the next Vision Pro. So of course these FCC leaks are nothing like the unboxing of the M5 iPad Pro from these Russian YouTubers, but it's still pretty cool to see these products getting leaked, and it pretty much confirms that we are going to be seeing new products pretty soon from Apple. So we might be seeing a late October, product launch, maybe an event, maybe just a press release, because these are really small updates. We'll have to wait and see, but we should be seeing new products at the end of October or early November. Now, speaking of the Vision Pro, we also got a very interesting reports from Bloomberg this week that talks about how Apple is going to delay the lighter Vision Air for the Meta Ray-Bans competitor. So basically, they're going to be taking people who work on the Vision Pro or the Vision Air, and they're going to move those people over to working on the glasses. So basically, that lighter version of the Vision Pro might end up getting delayed because of this work on the Meta Ray-Bans, because Meta is just completely crushing Apple right now in that realm, especially with the new Vision glasses. So basically, here's what Bloomberg said. Apple had been preparing a cheaper, lighter variant of its headset for release in 2027, but they announced internally last week that it's moving staff from that project to accelerate work on glasses. The company is working on at least two types of smart glasses. The first one, dubbed N50, will pair with an iPhone and lack its own display. Apple aims to unveil this model as soon as next year, ahead of release in 2027. Apple's also working on a version with a display, something that could challenge the just released Meta Ray-Ban display. The Apple version had been planned for 2028, but Apple is now looking to accelerate that development. So it doesn't necessarily say that the Vision Air is delayed, but it seems like at this point it's not going to come out, before these glasses. It seems like Apple is really focused on these glasses because they're seeing how crazy popular they are for average consumers, to be honest, like even enthusiasts and average consumers alike, which is kind of rare to hit both of those, but that's what the Meta Ray-Bans did, and they're continuing to build on that. So I personally cannot wait for a pair of Apple glasses. I will be getting those day one for sure. Anyways, guys, that's it for this week. This was a very short Apple Weekly episode. I just want to get you guys up to speed, and I want to get myself back up to speed with Apple Weekly as well, because I've missed these for the past few weeks because, as you guys can probably assume, I have been very busy with the iPhone 17 content. I've also been traveling like crazy, so I apologize for that. I have to have my set for this video, so I didn't want to try to make it on the road like I did that 26.0.1 video, which was, I thought it was terrible, but I had to get it up because I had to let you guys know about that big important update, and I wasn't going to be home for a few days. So hope you guys can bear with me on that, and just stick with me. I will be back to normal with these Apple Weekly, on a regular schedule, probably next week. Probably next week it will be coming out every Saturday, and it will be a lot more jam-packed than it is now. Of course, we will have the crazy AirTag story as well. So thank you guys so much for sticking with me. Hope you guys still enjoyed it. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Let me know your thoughts down there in the comments like always, and I'll see you soon.